So again, today is Keystroke Live going over report filters. And as always, we're doing Keystroke Live on Wednesdays at 10 o'clock Mountain Time. And this week is me with report filters. A couple things we're going to go over today in Keystroke is how to use saved settings on reports by adding just one or two simple filters and then giving it a saved setting so you can remember it months and years down the road when you want to run the same report. It's a fast and easy way to modify the report so you don't actually have to remember your settings every time. You can set up a few filters, use our save settings function to save those reports and give them different names. We'll also be going through how you can use report variables. These are actual fields you as dealers can create for your end users. And these variable fields can be used in filters also, and you'll see that if I use a report form that has a variable, then my filters also will have the same variable in them. So we'll get started by just jumping over here to Keystroke. And from the navigation menu, we're just going to go to Report Manager. And I thought I'd start off with some simple filters, things that people might be looking for, and then we might go into some more complex filters. First, let's just start about the inventory database. I'm just going to start here kind of on a blank sales screen and run you a report without any filters. And we'll notice how the actual report form shows you what filters are being used or if none are being used. And then we'll add filters to this to kind of home down on items we want to see. So again, I'll just print this to the screen here. And this should be your active window right now showing an inventory price list. There are 3 pages to this, 126 items. I'm going to go back to page 1. And if you have any problems seeing this report viewer screen, let me know in the chat window. This is just pretty much an inventory report sorted by description. This is our sample data, by the way. I'm just using it as some examples. And kind of notice how we have on page 3, it tells us 126 items on this report. And basically it's a simple price list, nothing fancy going on here. Let's add some filters to this and see how that works. I'm going back here to Keystroke. I'm going to unmute just for a moment here. So there might be some feedback.
Unmuted.
Were you able to, was everyone able to see the report on the screen? I just want to make sure, can everyone see this? Can anyone answer me at this time?
Yes.
I can see it, yes.
Okay. Last week I think I got my screens messed up. I didn't want to start off on a bad foot. Thank you very much. Let's go ahead and continue. I'm going to go ahead and add some filters. That's what this session's about. And I'm going to just go to this inventory tab here, and we're going to use the filter right here in the middle. And in Keystroke version 7, 630 and 7 and above, we have a blank filter box, different than older versions. Here I'll hit the insert or the F2 key, brings up a list of my options. I'm sorting on inventory at this time, so my choices pretty much are limited to the inventory database and a couple other system fields and so forth. But let's say I'd like to run an inventory report, and maybe I'm looking for a certain word in the description field. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter on description, and you'll see it puts in kind of our nomenclature like INV : description. And now you ask, well, now what do I do? So here are some examples. I am going to open up the help screen. Flop this over here. This is when you hit F1 on the help screen. You'll see this information right here about filters. And this is kind of a good generic kind of screen to look at, but I always like going down to the bottom here where it says filters and formula operators. This kind of tells me the power of using filters. And you can also look for this under index under filters. – Let's say I am looking for an inventory item that starts with the word the, T-H-E. So I see down here there's this logical, it says space after, and it says begins with. When I click on this, I hope this screen comes up okay for you to see. This is giving me an example of IMV description, then there's a space, the word steno, and then an asterisk at the end of it. So based on that, I'm going to go back to Keystroke, and I'm going to try that. So let's say I'm going to try to look for any inventory records that start with the word the. So according to the F1 help, I put a space, the word the, and then put in an asterisk. I'm going to say OK to this. And notice there's really no equal sign. It doesn't equal the asterisk. It's just space, the, and then the asterisk symbol. And you'll see why later when we do look for like multiplication and so forth, where the asterisk comes in different. I'll just say OK to this, OK to the report. Now I have a different report, and I'm hoping you all can see this. This has 6 inventory items. They all start with the word the. And you can see in the upper left here, it talks about this is an inventory report. It's a price list. Inventory is by description, and there is a filter. And this is important when your customers call you and say, hey, my reports aren't showing me information. You kind of probe them and ask, do you see anything about the word filter in the upper left? If they do, that might just be the problem. Some people from years gone by have always put in they want a filter on description A through Z, and they don't get descriptions that are 11-inch writing tablet because it starts with a 1-1. They don't get things like zebra because it's after the letter Z. So you find out people can actually filter out things very easily and not even know it. Their intuition says, I want to do descriptions A through Z, and they don't realize they have other stuff besides A through Z's. So there was an example of using the begins with filter. We're going to close this. I'm going to bounce back to the F1 help screen. We're going to try something else. We're going to say contains, and there's a couple things on this screen here that talks about contains. And if we are going to look for like a non-numeric character on one side or the other, here's an example. The one side is the description here, but this is an example that says description space *4. This is looking, is the number 4 anywhere in the description? And this says MTX as an example, but we're not going to do that at this time. So I'll close this and we'll go back to Keystroke and try the contains option. So I go to database, and this should be my current application. Yep. I will go ahead and go to filter again, and I'm going to delete what's in there. Whoops, hit the enter key. I'm going to hit insert, select inventory, say description, and in this case, I'm going to put in a space. Excuse me while I bounce around here. Space asterisk the, T-H-E. And I could do upper or lower case. In this case, it does not matter. When I say OK, this is a little different. This is the asterisk being on the left-hand side, and we'll run this report. And notice here it's looking for the word the anywhere in the description. And again, the filter up top is description space asterisk the, which is really means contains the. And so we have inside the IBM, and we have this, and here's the brother, B-R-O, then there's a T-H-E in the middle of the word brother, so that's being shown. All the other ones are pretty much obvious. So that's a simple idea on how to use the asterisk that contains, or if you want it to actually be very specific on starts with. Let's try some other filters that I think would be kind of popular. By the way, I'm just going to hit F12 here and show you our inventory and our tutor data. Let's just say I pull up this item here. Notice here we have a department of OFF. That's the office department, and a category of note. We have other items like I think we have envelopes in here that are in the office department, but are in an envelope category. Let's see if I can find one here. There we go. So here we're in the office. This is just an example of an item that's in the office department, but it's a category for envelopes, ENVL. So I'm going to use an example here in Report Manager and just kind of show you how you can search for one or more different fields. So if I go back to my inventory database report, and let's say I'm going to delete this out of here, and I'm going to select inventory, department, and this time I am going to put in the equal sign. That does come in most handy, but it's not always the case. So this one is saying exactly that the department must equal OFF for office. Hit OK on this. Let's run this report. And so here we have like a inventory price list based on just office supplies, or the department called office. So here's a case where I can now go back and say, yeah, this is exactly the report I'm looking for. I want to save this so I can remember this in a year from now or tax season next year, what I need to do. And again, I'm just using a database report, but inventory sales analysis reports work just as well. Here's my settings right here, and I look at the bottom. It says use Shift F10 to save the settings. So I use Shift F10, and I give it a name. I'm going to call it my let's call it the office supplies price list. If I put it as register 0, then all machines get to see this saved setting. So we say OK. I won't run it again. Well, I'll go ahead and run it. And let me go back. Now the very next time I come into the inventory database in Keystroke, it gives me some different options. One is under my shared settings. I have my office supplies, and it's a price list. So I can go ahead and just go right there. It remembers the filter I used, which was a filter on the department equal office. But let's say I'd like to add to this. Maybe I would like to change this report slightly and call it, I want it to be office supplies, but, and I use the word and here, it also has to have a category that's not envelopes. And so I'm going to go through this shortly here. Here's an example of the department has to be office, and the inventory category, and I have a less than and greater than symbol there if you cannot see it exactly. That means is not equal to. And you can actually see this in the F1 help screen too. That's the is not equal to is the less than or greater than. I think that works best because it also handles things like numbers. And we go ahead and say OK to this. I'm going to go ahead and say OK again. And I'm going to do Shift F10, and I'm going to change this names. Change the name of this save setting. And we'll just keep it as that. So I say OK. Now the next time I come in, I'm not going to run this yet, but we'll come back, hit Escape. Next time I come into Report Manager and I select Inventory and Database, now I have two different save settings. One's an office supplies without envelopes, and one is just an office supplies. So we'll try the one I just created. Let's hope that works. I say OK. And so now the list is slightly smaller. There's only 18 items on here. This has all the office supplies, but notice that the descriptions do not have any of the envelope items on there. And as an example, I'll just go back and run the other report and show you the full report of office supplies that do include envelopes. Very same report, but now we do have some envelope items on there. Looks like there's 5 of them on that report. So there's a simple example of how to use a filter on a static database report. And we'll go into like an inventory sales analysis report shortly. But let's go back one step here and show you some common problems people might run into. A lot of people use some different wording. Let's try something slightly different here. And watch as I hit the backspace key 1, 2, 3, 4 times. The 5th time it takes out the whole operator, 2 characters. The 6th time it takes out the whole INV category option. So be careful, don't hit the backspace key too many times thinking you're going to take out INV : CAT. You'll just wipe out everything. Of course, you can always hit cancel or escape. But let's use a different example here. Let's say if I want it to be the inventory department field of office supplies, but I want to also add in hardware supplies. A lot of people would say things like if the department equals office and the department equals hardware, but in reality it can only be one or the other. So keep in mind that the or would be the operator I'd want to use here. And I'll hit insert or F2 again. Inventory department equals, I'm going to do HW because I already know it's hardware. Here's an example, and watch the word or. It'll change shortly here when I hit enter. It put in the pipe characters. You'll see double pipes represent the word or. It's kind of a way to save, that's actually one character there. The word and is replaced by double ampersands. So here's an example that I'm going to look at office supplies and hardware items. But keep in mind, I am really saying my department can either equal office or hardware. If it's one or the other, show it to me on the report. So I'll say OK to that, say OK again. I'm going to do Shift F10 and maybe call this something different. Something like that, office supplies and hardware. And I'll say OK. Now I'm going to print this report to the screen. Here's a slightly different report that has some hardware items on it. I'm trying to find them here. The hole punch is a hardware item, I believe. So this is where the department equals office supplies or hardware items. Well, let's move on, and I'm going to show you some little more tricks in here. Some of the tricks are using actual variables. I'm going to move down to one of our favorite reports, the Inventory Sales Analysis Report. And I'm going to show you the form first so you get an idea of where I'm going with this. If I hit F3 on this item here, this is the actual report settings, but I want to show you down near the bottom, we have different variables. We actually calculate the average cost, we calculate the average price, and we calculate the percent profit. So you'll see fields like this here, this RVAR percent profit, and it would actually be a variable I can use on a filter. So I'm going to just say escape here or cancel, select that form. Let's run this report, sold items only. Let's just run this first to see where we're at. Here's the report. I'll go back to the top. This report actually shows you the item, how many were sold, the price, the cost, the gross revenue, and the percent profits on the far right. The profit dollar amount is there second to the right. And so you can see some of the items here have a null. This is a case where this the price was sold for free, but the cost was not 0. So it actually is not really, it's kind of an infinite number there. We have a few more null symbols. Here's an example down here, the gift basket. It shows a cost of $0 and shows a price, so this is 100% profit. And I'll show you kind of how we can use the filter now on report variables. So here's the bottom of the report. Maybe this is a good place to look. A couple more of these $0 costs. These are rental items, so we're actually not putting the cost in there. They're just being rented and brought back, rented and brought back. So it's 100% profit on this report, but they're going to cost for it later when they actually get rid of the item. So we'll go ahead and close this and use a filter. So inventory, sales analysis. I'm going to jump right to the inventory section here. Select filter again. Now when I hit insert, you're going to notice I have a lot more different fields to choose from. This is a sales analysis report, so it has some calculated amounts like analysis totals. It has some sales invoice amounts that are calculated. Every line item is calculated. The inventory is there, and it also has some calculated fields. But notice down here at the bottom, we actually have report variables. Because the form has a report variable on that form file, we can now use it in a filter. So if I want to hit enter on report variables, I see the 3 variables I have. These would not be here unless I selected the exact form I wanted to use. So when I select percent profit, I'm going to just say equals 100 right now for an example. And this is 100% profit items. I'm going to hit F10. I'll hit Shift F10 to save this setting. Just add some names to it. It's a shared setting. Say OK. So the next time somebody comes in, they have a couple options to choose from. Let's just run this for the same date range. I just picked a large date range. Boom. So these are actually filters on not an actual field on the inventory database. It actually is a calculated field at the time it was sold and what the average cost was and the price was at the time it was sold. And I've created a variable, and now I'm filtering on that variable. So as you can see, you might create variables in your report field, report file, that you may never print on the actual form, but you might be able to filter on it. So there might be some tricky calculation you want to use to actually say these are my special parts or whatever, and when you're able to calculate it, then you can filter on it. So let's go back a step. I'm going to do another little change to this. So I could say something like this. If the profit is less than 100, so it would be 99% or less, or 99.99% or less. If I say and greater than 0, this may or may not work all the time. What it's doing is it's comparing the profit to less than 100 and greater than 0, and it's saying it's got to be both. A better way to say this would be, I'm going to get rid of this here, hit insert and say my report variable, just repeat it. This is kind of a little more logical for keystroke, something to think about. If things aren't working with the field put in first, you might want to put it in twice. This is saying if the percent profit is less than 100 and, I forgot the and part, notice as it was replaced by double ampersand, and the percent profit is greater than 0, show me those items. So let's run this. I'm not going to save this setting, but I'll just go and run it. And I think I have a typo there. I can see it. By the way, just seeing it up here at the top left, it sees that there's something. I must have made a mistake. So let's go back and try that again. I'm just taking out the space. Somehow I don't know if I did this right or wrong, or maybe I'm losing my mind here. I just tested this. Inventory. Excuse me. Report variables. So I'm kind of picking this apart right now to see what I've maybe done wrong, and I put in inventory percent profit is greater than 0. It shows me all of those. It does not show me the null, or it does show me the null. We can get rid of those later. But I just had done this, so I'm sure this is going to work if I do it right. Well, somehow retyping it seemed to fix it. I'll maybe figure out what I did wrong there. This is a different report here. Maybe I'll shrink it down just a little bit. Maybe that doesn't help that much. I'm sorry. This is a report of all the items that are between 100% and 0%. And notice that we can see there's no zeros or nulls, so it seems like I fixed my filter by retyping it. Thought I had it right, but sometimes those little spaces can become problematic. So that ended up working just fine. I can then go ahead and save this if I'd like, but I'm going to go ahead and try something else here. I could just show you this report actually has a sorting. If you wanted to, I could sort the inventory by the percent profit, still use the same filter, say OK to this, and now I've got this sorted in a different 69% on the way down to 19%, and I can even tell it only to show me the top 10 items, and that would be the top 10 items of profit. So we've kind of gone through a couple of phases. I'm going to show you one more thing that's a little unique in the sales part of the program, because a lot of people call us on this. Under sales transactions now in version 7.15, we have a couple extra filters here. Here's a transaction filter and a line item filter. You'll have to kind of use these with caution. Let's go ahead. I'm just going to run this report. I'm going to do its summary right now. This report has a total of 30 transactions, and here's our dollar amounts. But I'm going to start using some filters. So I could say something like the transaction numbers have to be greater than a certain number. So that would be a transaction filter. If I'm looking just for, so the sales invoice, the number, if it's greater than, let's say 10. So I'm just looking for sales invoices greater than 10. And I'm looking here, as you can tell, but the 2 through 9 is in there. I think that's an alphanumeric filter, a field. And that's what you have to be careful about too. Some fields have alphanumeric fields, and you might have to use a report variable to change it to a actual numeric field to use a filter like I'm trying here. I'm going to move on past this and actually show you a filter. Let's show the detailed information. I'm going to go back to page 1 of the 7-page report, and let's say I'm looking for stock number. Whenever I've sold stock number 23, I like to see those transactions where only stock number 23 is on those transactions. So I would hit escape, and is there more than one here? Let me just page down. 80, 70. I'm just looking for more than one, maybe. 45, 47. Yeah, let's just try that. So stock number equals 23. Here's a case where we're going to use a line item filter. And by clicking insert there and hitting F2, I'm going to say line items. And I say stock number equals 23. Go and run the same report here for the same period of time. It's going to show me that one transaction. So we could actually, if I had multiple transactions with stock number 23, I could summarize all the transactions that contain that item. This might be a coupon code, a promotion. So think about items that you might set up as service items that are really just flags for you to say, this is an important event. I need to kind of know more about it. I'm just using stock number 23 in this example. It kind of doesn't make too much sense. But so there we have an example here. Now keep in mind, I can exclude the other line item if I wanted to, but then the numbers may not add up correctly, and this is kind of important to know. Then if I go back to transaction and go to last used, And if I have something like don't print if empty, and I turn off the include all detailed items, now watch how this report will change. It actually shows the invoice, and it shows that I sold 10 at $13, so my subtotal should be $131.80, but it's not. These fields right here, the subtotal, discount, shipping, and tax, and total, all are actually what we call header records. They come from the transaction themselves. If you wanted to make a report like this and only show a summary of just the one or so line items on a transaction, you would actually have to go edit the form and change these, we'll call them header record fields, from subtotal to a calculated field that pretty much is just adding up the extended price. So it would take a little bit of work, but a lot of dealers like this idea that now we can actually go back and filter on certain items that are on transactions and maybe see exactly what transactions or customers that bought those transactions. So kind of in a nutshell, we've kind of bounced around different filters and how to use them. Keep in mind the F1 help screen is going to be what you're going to want to use to find out those different equations and so forth. Speaking back about on filters, we can save our filter settings. We can use report variables on filters, and then there's a lot more you can do and get really complex. But keep in mind, sometimes, just like I found, I had to kind of rewrite my filters. Somehow I had done something wrong and didn't really have time to figure it out, but I just started from scratch and rebuilt it, and it kind of came through, and everything worked out okay. And don't forget to save your reports once you're done getting the report just the way you like it. Tell your customers, Shift F10, save the report. Then they come back and they forgot what the settings are. They don't have to call any of us to remember. It's right there for them. So I will go ahead and unmute the crowd here and see if there's any questions that anyone has about report filters today. And before I do that, I should page down to this. Next week, sales reports, a little bit more on reports this month. We're going to be having Lynn go over some different sales reports. Probably more in detail about these. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Mike, in one of the examples, you put a space before the filter. I believe it was one of the filters contains as. Why would you ever put a space in front of the filter?
That's a good question. So in our F1 help screen, and the long answer is, if you don't put the space, sometimes Keystroke will want to multiply something. It might want to take a description and multiply it by 4 versus asking, does the description contain a 4? So sometimes you put a space before but not after. Sometimes you put one or more spaces on either side of the asterisk to tell it, hey, don't do any arithmetic equations, don't multiply things together. Because what you're saying on a filter, when I say that the description times 4, it's looking for that as being true or false. True being 1 or false being 0, and description times 4 is neither of those, and you'll get nothing on your report. Kind of goes back to old programming code, and I just like to point you out to the F1 help where we have logical. Does it contain? And here's some examples. If the space is here, it's not trying to multiply description times the word paper or the list price times 95. It just wants to know in the list price, is it 95? Because the list price of 0 times 95 is 0, and you're going to get a false, and it won't show that item. So it's kind of a tricky question. Good question. It happens a lot. Let me cancel this and just go back to the top under arithmetic. This would be like taking the list price times the quantity on hand, and notice how we put a space in there. It's kind of just a tricky way to distinguish one operator, an asterisk, to do 3 different things. So, and I never remember, so I always have to hit the F1 key because, I just sometimes if I want to know if it begins with, that's one thing, or if it contains is a different thing, or if I want to multiply list price times the cost, then I could do that. Good question. Any other questions out there?
Yes.
Muted.
I'm sorry, Jesse, were you saying something?
I'm getting a lot of feedback.
Yeah, I'm going to turn, I think Jesse Katz has speakers that are rebounding. Is this Ken?
Yeah, this is Ken.
How's it sound now?
Yeah, sounds good now, Mike. One question I would have in doing these, when you start playing with these reports, if these are critical reports, it would be really critical to to know exactly, say on a smaller range basis of, so that basically when you do these reports, that if you've made an error in them, and if they're critical reporting reports, that you could really mess up some totals if you didn't know exactly the numbers that you were working with.
I think you have a good point. I think it boils down to this: is don't use filters. Filters are a way to exclude information, but here I'm teaching you all on filters. I think what's important is that people always need to run the report for everything. But you're going to have a customer that says, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. I want to take my lottery tickets off my sales. I want to, bottle deposits. I want them reported separately. And so they should always start with, what were my total sales for the month? And I would certainly not exclude any one invoice or any one line item. But then say, okay, that's my total. Then I got 3 other reports. All sales that aren't bottle deposits and all sales that aren't lotto. And then a lotto report and a bottle sales report, and add them up, and then you see like, oh yeah, they do add up. That's a good question. I think the critical reports are run it for everything. Don't exclude it. People will call and say, I've been running it A through Z because the alphabet's A through Z. Those kind of mistakes are made all the time. But the reason why we're talking about this is everyone doesn't want the standard show me everything report. They want a lot less. And that's why saving a setting, once you get it right and you've done the math and you and your customer have said this is the right number, I've double checked it with however they would double check, save it as a saved setting for all registers, and then that's going to be the one we're going to use. And the save settings on register number 0, if you saw that, that's the shared settings, they do not get changed. If I went in there and tinkered with it and changed the percentage or a filter and ran it, it doesn't automatically overwrite that previous setting. It's only the local last used ones that get overwritten every time. And that brings up another thing. This is kind of outside of this, but let's go ahead and just show you. We were just talking about a lot about reports and filters. I can go back into Keystroke. I can set up a new queue, a new group, and call it, important. Make it a shared report, and then just go find the ones I just did. I think my important report is the 100% profit report. I did a office supplies and hardware report. Now that I have this saved, I can always come back here. Those settings will never change, and I can now remember. And it might be called your end of year reports or end of quarter or sales tax monthly reports. So once you have your reports saved, then you can add them to groups or queues and have them fired off, and Keystroke will remember them for years and years and years. But yeah, Ken, you're right. Make sure they're right. Any other questions?
Mike, I have a stupid one.
Sure.
Is there a report that will give my customer a quick overview of the sales for part numbers? For example, if they do a critical list of items they need to order, they want to know if there's a quick way that they could look at a monthly sales total for that particular part number.
Yeah, I think the most powerful report is the inventory sales analysis report. You can set this up many, many ways. We use some simple filters to show you examples, but you might want to run this report and group it on like the beer department or something like that, and I want to see all my beer items and what they're selling for, or I want to see all my mountain bikes and what they're being sold for. So grouping by department or category is good. Saving these settings, and then just running it every month, and you'll see what I sell. You can actually turn these reports into what I sold, you can throw on there what the minimum quantity is and what the order quantity is, and to see if you want to rebuild it. So I think it's just the inventory sales analysis is a great report for, and I'll just run it real quick, maybe get rid of my filter again, because again, start from no filter. Here's all my items, but maybe I only want a certain department. I could easily just set this up. This is not even a filter in a sense. This is just saying I want to see department. Oh, I don't know. Just hardware to hardware, and all my.
Well, they're
sales.
living in the past from an old software package from 2005 before 2004 when they switched over to Keystroke. They used to run a analysis, a recommendation, order recommendation report, that underneath the stock number and the cost and, you know, the average price and so forth, directly underneath that there would be a column along the top under quantity, average cost. It would have J, F, M, January, February, March, and so forth for the prior 12 months.
Okay.
I guess that would be a real customized report, wouldn't it?
That would be, that's kind of more like our multi-store report where it puts things into monthly buckets for every store. So you'd see the monthly buckets at the top, the stores on the left kind of thing. Those are what they call two-pass reports, where it's doing January 1st, giving you the numbers, February, and so forth, and giving you the numbers. So that's a little different than what Keystroke does. We kind of usually do a single-pass report. We don't have any like dashboards of all these monthly buckets. We do have the summary feature. There's a lot of new search features in Sales Manager, but no, we don't. It would be a customized report, and we had some in the past, but I think now we're leaving it up to our dealers and resellers to kind of come up with a way that you can export the data and get it out. But I think it's on a wish list, but I don't think it's going to be done in version 7 anytime soon.
All right, thanks.
Yeah,
Mike, I had made a presentation to a prospective customer about 3 weeks ago, and they were showing me their existing POS system in the reporting, and it was really impressive. They were able to be in a report screen, and they could drill down into items or history from the report screen. Like a specific item, they could drill down on it just by simply double-clicking on a field, and it would take them into that item if they needed to make
right.
a change. Do you ever foresee anything like that with Keystroke?
You know, I don't know where we're going with different reports. I think everybody kind of says that they want it this way and they want it that way, and you know, that sounds like a great idea. It's almost like an Excel spreadsheet where there's a number on there, but you click on that and it opens up sheet 2 and it shows you every sale of every invoice and all the dollar amounts on that. I could see that being a neat feature. We would have to get more information, see who really wants that. Are the people knocking down the doors to get that report, or do they want like Keystroke Express, where I'd rather not have all the bells and whistles and spend more money, I want it cheap. So it's hard to tell where we should go, but if you see something that's really impressive, maybe we should find out more about it and just drop us an email and we'll put it on our wish list.
Okay, good job today. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you all for attending, and if you have any questions or questions on filters, just give us a call here at the support line and we'll help you out, okay?